The abyss swallowed the steak she had saved for Deicide and sat at the corner of the table. Black quills covered her entire body as she narrowed her eyes at him. Deicide heaved a sigh and then raised his eyebrows to everyone else, then rapped his sharp fingers on the table. Yes. Come, Great Father, a man said. The table was cleared and Deicide followed the group to a shaded area behind the village. Here was the blue grass again and the silvery moss, but further on he could see a great tree on the crest of a hill, shooting up into the overhead, as high as any sky would be on a large planet. Everyone sat in one of two circles, the children in a smaller circle in front of their parents. Once again their eyes turned to Deicide. He noticed how all of the children seemed about the same age, as well as the adults. There were no elderly. None of the adults looked any older than Deicide, permanently froze in their physical primes. Unlike Deicide's scarred physique, their skin was flawless. They looked like wingless golden angels. Deicide wondered if these people had ever felt pain or misery. How could they? Even their children were birthed by surrogates, he thought. Well, thank you for the meal, Deicide said. It was our pleasure, Great Father, a man said. Living his whole life in a militarized society, Deicide was accustomed to people who could not keep up with the beat of conversation, or remember the points they were going to make. He sat calmly, unmoved by the weight of the silence between them. Tell us a story, Great Father, a child said. Shush, Josephel, a woman said. The man to his right chuckled. Every time you return, you tell us a story of your travels and how you conquered the lessers, a man said. Deicide wanted to ask about the machine mother and another possible gate that was functional, but these people had treated him so well, even though he felt they were the ones who should be explaining things to him. He sighed and began to think of a story that was suitable for children, that would not bore the adults. Deicide looked up into the twinkling canopy. When I was a child, I met a man called the Great White, Deicide said. A child tugged at one of the purple cordons looped around his belt. You told us of the Great White last time, a child said. Everyone nodded. Deicide shifted and folded his legs. Then what is it you all want to know about me, other than what you already know? Deicide said. Very little about your childhood is written in the archives, a man said. And all you've told us in the past was about other people, a woman said. How did you get the name Deicide? Someone said. Deicide looked around at all the faces, then to the abyss. Do you all know of the alternate worlds? Deicide said. Yes, I believe so. The half-worlds, someone said. There is nothing half about these worlds, Deicide said. For if those worlds are halved, then also our worlds are halved. It took Deicide a moment to think back when he first felt the tugging, as if something were trying to pull him in another direction. In the beginning, he had only known his mission, to kill the pretender god. His surrogate mothers and fathers explained to him that it was Not's duty to restart the race with her science, but he, Lord Antonio Elias Meehan II, was to slay the god that had betrayed their people. To become this god-slayer would require enormous strength that he could not achieve on his own. It was in the old texts passed down from scholars and thinkers that not only lived aboard the Demiurge's ship, but also conversed with him, that a clue to his power was discovered. The Demiurge claimed that he was from the single true world, and he was believed to be the one true god that had created obstructions from some divine plan. But Demiurge had walked as a man before he could fly, had struggled with stones before he could move mountains. Though it was not these faults which the obstructions claimed him a pretender god, it was because the Demiurge had no answers concerning the real world, and it was later discovered that he had created a partition, separating them from the actual world. Deicide told them how the son of the Demiurge, Antonio I, had sided with the obstructions instead of his father. The original Antonio led an army against the Demiurge, but neither Antonio nor the obstructions were warriors, and they were slain by the Demiurge's assemblage. And when nearly all of the men had been eradicated, the Demiurge crippled the rest with infertility and left the race to dwindle away. The women and the few men tried to cure themselves of the fate which would annihilate them. But the demiurge was the one that had created them. Only he could undo the curse he had placed upon them. So a team of women had the idea to clone the only man that was not susceptible to the twisted science that had brought about this plague. From the genetic material of Antenor I, a special set of children were born. All of them were engineered to be strong and swift. Most of the obstrusion weaknesses had been bred out of them, and those that retained the impurities quickly died during the intense regimen they were put through. Deicide had been among those that lived through the first rounds. All of the children, male and female, were about equal in terms of strength and intelligence, but Deicide was the child that most closely resembled the son of the demiurge. Though they all had been raised in a similar fashion and environment as the original, Deicide was the only one that was sensitive to the different sovereignties around him, even able to manipulate them at a very young age. It was then, one day, that Deicide sensed one of these sovereignties that was as strong as his own. He was busy moving blocks around on a table without touching them with his hands, an act which made the other children jealous, so he was forced to practice in private. Just at the corner of his right eye, he saw reality warp and darken. And then a girl was there. The lights of this room dimmed, and Deicide knew he was not entirely in his own world anymore, but somewhere in between hers and his. She was dressed in the furs of some great beast, and when she pulled off her hood, her face was as pale as the snow that was melting on her shoulders. Deicide had never seen anyone with this white skin before. The lightest color he had seen obstrusions in was a moderate gray, but this girl was no resident of Obstruse. He stood and faced the girl. She was a few years older than him, and looked like a warrior, but he had beaten Ecocide and the rest of the lionesses, and they were the strongest girls he knew. She stepped forward, and he could feel that she possessed a great deal of sovereignty. Every object that was not connected to the floor was now raised into the air. She smiled at Deicide, knowing she had impressed him. "That's amazing," Antenor said, still physically able to speak in obstrusion, though poorly. He was about to say more, but was unsure if she could understand what he was saying. She came closer and beckoned for Antenor to meet her halfway. When they had reached the center, Antenor realized that he was not in his world at all, but hers. He watched as giant fish-like creatures swam in the dark sky. Lightning was constantly striking off in the distance, and he could not tell if it was thunder or the steady beat of a drum somewhere, the drum of war. Her lips began to move, but not as an obstrusion's would, whose language was more sung than spoken. No, her speech was choppy. Later he would compare it closer to how humans spoke. When she placed her arms around him, the words were still unfamiliar, but he could somehow feel her meaning. Deicide looked up into her yellow eyes. There was curiosity in them, and she played with one of his antennas, not knowing how much it hurt or annoyed him. Then she placed his head on her chest, which had not begun to grow breasts. He could feel a powerful heartbeat underneath. "I come for trade," she said, rocking the boy now in her tight grip. "What is it that you want?" Antenor said. Of course it mattered not what she wanted, only that he accepted the offer. They would be unable to articulate their goals to one another, even if they spoke fluently in each other's languages. However, their wishes were aligned, but continuing on this path somehow, they would help each other attain them. At least, that was what the ancient text had said. She pulled Antenor back so that she could stroke his face. "Trade," she said. It was almost as if she thought he was some pet, a puppy she had found somewhere and was fascinated by. He had been told by his surrogate mothers to accept if a visitor should offer. "Yes, I will honor the fair trade," Antenor said. She stared into Antenor's face. Now that the bond was partially made, she had access to all he knew, including his language. She searched his mind for a suitable name. "You will be a man bested by no other. Gods will fear you, and the unspoken laws of the universe will have no hold upon you. For you have my strength, and are protected by my love," she said. "I name you Deicide." Deicide looked up at the girl, knowing that her words felt genuine. for she had always watched him as he slept. He could feel her sitting in the darkness of the night. It was she that had whispered for him to rise after beaten down by his strict mentors. Her mouth was like the entrance to some drowned-out cave into oblivion, her black teeth the stalactites and the stalagmites. I will provide for you the concoctions that you require to make you strong. Your size will be unending, and no matter the number of lovers I take, you shall command the most love and respect in my heart, Deicide said. You are the abyss.